Josh Brown, you got to play one of the most anticipated games of 2025. Good Lord, God damn it. And I'm extremely jealous. I'm talking about Rebellion's Atomfall. We were invited down to a press event that only Mr. JB got to go to. And I'm going to ask him a whole bunch of questions. I'm like I said, I'm a jealous man. I'm a jealous man.
You know what? This game I've been really anticipating since it was first announced, because essentially, if you made a game based on old JB's interests over here, it would take vaguely the form of Atomfall. Yeah. It's a first-person shooter survival RPG game set in 1960s Lake District after the very real-world 1957 Windscale disaster. So it's blending real-world history with this fictional interpretation where that area has been quarantined. The demo, I was told, was about 3 hours into the game, so very early doors. I played for about 1.5 hours, and overall, I'm really positive on it. It's not necessarily surprised me if you have seen the gameplay videos that they've shown so far, or some of the trailers, but I'm very, very excited to play more. I've got lots of specifics to jump into, because I don't know how much you've been keeping up with the pre-release stuff so far.
Quite a lot since this. That's the thing. The Lake District in the sort of northwest of England, the west of England, I absolutely love that place in real life. Shout out to anyone who lives in the Lake District or who's been there. I just love that location. But the whole thing with this game being Fallout in the Lake District is fantastic. It seems like, in terms of the footage that's out there, it reminds me a lot of like early 2010s Fallout. Like, you know, they did Fallout New Vegas, like a lot of the mod scene that was around for Fallout 3 after the fact. I hope, or I assume, that's part of like the budget that's being applied. Like Rebellion are obviously known for Sniper Elite quite a lot. How does it feel in terms of the like presentation, budgetary stuff? Like, is it okay that it's not this mind-blowing presentation?
I think so. I think a lot of the sometimes jank actually works to its benefit. So it's definitely more of a survival game in terms of the gameplay than like a first-person shooter, like a Doom or something.
Right.
You know, you're very slow in how you move. The weapons themselves, you have very little ammo for them. They take a long time to fire, a lot of bolt actions, a lot of revolvers, a lot of reloading, a lot of managing like space and your shots and stuff like that. I like that a lot.
Is a headshot a headshot?
A headshot's a headshot. Okay. There's no damage numbers that I saw anyway.
We need a genre that actually says a headshot's a headshot, because there's too many damage numbers coming off a dude's face.
But that's why it works, because I like that style. I don't mind a little bit of, you know, kind of like sluggishness and methodicalness when it is a survival game like this, rather than, you know, you're doing John Wick-esque headshots all over the place. I like it when, you know, a bullet can have that.
Can kill a guy.
Can kill a guy in one go, is what I'm trying to say.
YouTube monetization.
But that idea of, you know, something like the original Last of Us, where you've got 10 shots and you've kind of got to make them all count, it's definitely indebted to that. The weapons that I were using were a mix of guns and melee items as well, because like I said, you haven't got very much ammo, so when you run out, you swap into a cricket bat or an axe or a knife or whatever to try and close the distance and get the kills. It's I was fighting like gangs of 4 or 5 enemies at a time, and they were quite brutal. You know, you can stealth around them, you can do stealth kills, you've got a bow and arrow, silence takedowns, all of the stuff you'd expect from a kind of open world first person thing like this. But I found that balance to be quite satisfying. Like, it's not going to be the most robust or, you know, immersive gameplay that you've ever experienced, but it absolutely does the job. Like, melee feels satisfying. Like I said, pulling out a cricket bat, whacking someone over the noggin with it, it works. It feels good. It feels visceral, and I think the moment-to-moment gameplay from that perspective, I found really satisfying overall, and was what I wanted out of the gameplay that was shown off so far. That kind of like survivalistic approach.
I'm curious, in a year where we have Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Avowed, like Kingdom Come being really slow, really methodical, you earn every step you take in that game. Avowed being extremely immediate, you know, just here's some fun, here's some cool mechanics, here's a dodge or whatever. There's a dodge in Kingdom Come, but you can do it a lot more in Avowed. Where does it sit on the scale of like slow burn, earn everything, immediacy? And also, how much does it feel like just another one of these? Like, I think to me, like, one of the big selling points is that it is a Fallout, it is a one of them, but it's in the north, it's in England, like all the accents and everything else. That's the big selling point for me personally. But something like Avowed, like I said, that gets chastised because it is another one of them. It feels like an old school Bethesda RPG from like 2006, you could argue.
Yeah.
How much of that DNA is in there? How much are they changing things up?
It's definitely, you'll jump into Avowed, you'll jump into Atomfall, you'll see the footage that's on screen now, and it'll be instantly familiar in terms of the gameplay and the mechanics that you're working with. Like, you've seen this crafting system before, you've seen the upgrades before. You know, you're going to be putting skill points into looting hitting bodies quicker or performing takedowns that, take less noise to pull off. And that's fine. I think it does that stuff well. It's not reinventing the wheel, but all of that stuff feels good enough. I think the way the crafting is implemented makes sense with the resource management. It doesn't really feel arbitrarily like tacked on or anything like that. It feels again, kind of similar to The Last of Us, more similar to something like The Last of Us's crafting mechanics than Fallout 4's, where you're in the moment, you're like, oh, I need a bandage. Have I got enough resources to make one of those? I need to make a Molotov. I need to do this. I need to do that. And you're always just scraping by, which, again, I like from a sort of post-apocalyptic survival game like this. But yeah, like you said, it's familiar in that sense. It could end up being overly familiar after 20 hours or however long the game ends up being. But for this first period, it felt like at least everything was intentional. It wasn't kind of like Avowed, where I got frustrated, where it sort of felt like a lot of the resources or a lot of the upgrade trees were just there because it felt like that's what an RPG needs to have in 2025, if you know what I mean. In here, it is admittedly familiar, but in service of delivering that post-apocalyptic improvisational, scrappy combat loop.
Okay, and I guess you felt quite comfortable fighting all the dudes at once. Like, I feel like at the minute, I am mainlining Kingdom Come 2, so at the most I can take on like 3 dudes, and you get used to that stuff and whatever. But in regards to combat models for something like Atomfall, what they've shown in the trailers seems like you are improvising quite a lot. It's like, oh, I'm going to make a grenade, I'm going to throw that in, then I'm going to dodge back and do some melee stuff. That immediacy can work massively in its favor. I know you've written down enemy types and stuff as well.
Yeah.
So you do have a lot of different.
No, I got my ass kicked. People I can't lie. Like, there was when I got used to the controls. Obviously, like I say, I was just thrown in. I didn't really know what I was doing. It's just knowledge of similar games that kind of got me by. Like, once I started getting to grips with how the weapons worked, when to use melee, when to use the bow, when to do takedowns, it became a bit more natural. But you do have, at least early on, like very limited health. If you take a few hits, that's kind of you done for. In classic survival game fashion, you have to manage a stamina bar, so you need to make sure you're keeping on top of that, Scott Tillman, so you don't run out and just get absolutely whacked because you're vulnerable. There is a level of difficulty there that, again, I appreciate. Yeah. And it made those combat encounters feel like high intensity and gave them a lot of suspense, because you do know that you make a mistake and you're going to get absolutely headshotted or surrounded by cultists or whatever it was. So there's a nice balance there. It definitely feels closer to Kingdom Come than Avowed. Not as sim heavy as Kingdom Come, but still quite punishing in that regard, which again I definitely take as a plus. Yeah, you mentioned as well, and I've got notes about like the different factions and the enemy types. I fought a lot of humanoids. I'll say that, of course. Very early days, I fought cultists, I fought military men, I fought some bandits as well. And the cultists that's who I spent most of the time with, and they perform, they're just like regular bandits, but visually I really appreciated their aesthetic and their design and the way they kind of like fought you. A lot of their bandit camps were, full of rituals that you would discover, and like these bloody rituals, these wicker men that you were climbing and looting and hoping the enemies didn't set on fire.
Plural.
Yeah, like one of these.
I thought it was one.
There's one in the trailer, but I found at least 3, I think, early on. They kind of work as, I don't know, little rewards if you get up there and you find little stashes in. A lot of stuff to craft with, some new weapons and stuff like that. So in terms of the exploration on top of the combat, I liked it. It was a relatively small area in terms of landmass. I think there's going to be way more maps in the finished game. This was just one of them. But it was very dense with stuff. Like, it was packed with camps or points of interest. And there was a lot of verticality to it, which I really liked. A lot of bridges that you could get up to. A lot of, structures or dams that had this kind of imposing verticality over the landscape and gave you more options and more to explore than just what you might expect looking at the surface area of the map, like I say, and knowing how to get from one point to the other. And like you said, because it's in the Lake District, it had that kind of just sort of uniqueness that you don't see necessarily in post-apocalyptic games, because it's distinctly Northern English. You're in, like I said, these rundown military bunkers from the 60s, and you've got these dams and stuff, and these dilapidated houses, these Victorian houses that are overgrown. So visually, in that way, I look the level design and the world design was definitely the best part of the experience. In it, when I got tapped on the shoulder to say, "Hey, the demo's over," I was like, I just wanted to see what that was, though. But I imagine that once I saw that, there would have been something else that I wanted to go see, and it have that knock-on effect. So I hope they managed to keep this level of detail in this one map across the rest of the game, for sure.
I do love that 2025 is indicative of just how many devs have picked up the baton from Bethesda. I know IGN put that out as part of their review on Avowed, just saying that Bethesda have dropped the immersive RPG baton and other devs have picked it up. But I don't feel like Atomfall is being considered in that conversation just as much quite yet. I think it will at launch. But it is interesting seeing Avowed and Obsidian do an Elder Scrolls, do a one of them, do a Bethesda RPG, even though obviously they did New Vegas in the past. And then this has a lot of, or it feels like anyway from the outside looking in, there's a lot of Fallout style vibes in there.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the bunkers, because in one of the most recent gameplay overviews, they mentioned that you'll come across bunkers, which is obviously so close to the vaults in Fallout, which is interesting because I'm like, how much do you want me to be applying this Fallout thing? I guess it's a selling point, really. If you're after a good Fallout game, it has been quite a while. And so, you know, how much of that is in there where you're going into the bunkers, you're finding, because we haven't even talked about story stuff yet.
Yeah, well, honestly, it was quite light on story stuff because I was just allowed to explore. I was allowed to go wherever I wanted. I ended up mostly just doing kind of freewheeling exploration.
He's a side mission guy.
I'm a side mission guy. What can I say? But I did encounter some characters and I did take on some missions. But yeah, the Fallout comparisons are going to be obvious. To me, there are some key differences in terms of the presentation. I love Fallout. It's literally my favorite series of all time. But I found in the later games, you know, Fallout 4, Fallout 76, the goofiness was kind of too present. Like, the games have always been satirical, they've always been darkly funny, but I don't know, it veered on the side of silliness a little bit for me personally, and I still love Fallout 4. Did a video on it. Maybe you should check it out.
Maybe
channel,
you should.
Who knows? With this, though, it felt like, obviously, there's dark humor in there, there's satire, there's kooky characters that pop up, but it felt like it was played a little bit more straight, a bit like a Fallout 3, perhaps,
That's
or
good.
a New Vegas, or Fallout 1 or 2. So that kind of dedication to selling the world while knowing that some ridiculous things are happening. That balance was a little bit more kind of up my street, and the same thing goes for the bunkers, which, yeah, you can make the comparison to vaults, but these are definitely way more real world there. They are just kind of like empty bunkers that had some maybe lab stuff in there or experiments going on, but it definitely feels more in line with the rest of the world, like on the surface. Like, there's one that I went in that had this mech in there. It was kind of like a little robot with flamethrowers that some guy was in, I think. But it was sort of ramshackle. It wasn't too sci-fi, if that makes sense, because I remember seeing some of the early trailers, and I'm not a huge robot guy. I'm going to throw that out there. I don't necessarily like fighting robots.
Like a big Gundam.
Like a big...
Not a fan of the Gundam.
Not a huge fan. Zone of the Enders, I only played it to play Metal Gear Solid 2.
Don't say things that are that personally wounding.
I'm sorry. But the way they treat stuff like that in here, again, it's a bit more industrial, it's a bit more real world, you know. I was running around this thing trying to shoot the gas canisters off the back of it. Again, nothing that you've necessarily not experienced before, but a real world approach to the more fantastical elements was something that I really enjoyed.
Could you steal that thing afterwards?
I couldn't. I could only...
I wonder if you can make one.
I could only steal its components, not actually jump in it. But maybe later on in the game, I'm not sure. That was the only one I encountered, and I probably wasn't supposed to be there. I was stupid. I'm gonna just say it right now. I had a limited time with this demo, and I got instantly demolished.
And they said,
by
Josh,
this
go
thing.
north, and you went west.
And I could probably feel the room around me thinking, why is he trying to kill this thing? You shouldn't do it. But I wanted to, goddammit, and I did eventually get it, and it'll let me get it. So I like that there is that freeform element.
That's cool.
Where you're going to encounter stuff, you know, that is way beyond your capabilities right now, but it's not a complete hard lock. You can get around it.
Right.
And then when I killed this thing, I got a clue to another mission, so it kind of paid off in the end in that regard. But yeah, the missions themselves, Scott, I don't know if you know too much about this.
I've been following the trailers because I'm psyched, but I don't. You know that thing when you don't want to know too much.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's like I'm kind of skirting around it.
The way the quests work, at least in this early portion of the game, you do have kind of quest givers. There are NPCs you can talk to, but the form that missions take are what they call leads. So you don't necessarily have go here, do that as a point A or point B thing. Okay. You'll have a thread of that surrounds a main mission, and you might be able to pick up different clues or different leads depending on where you've explored. So you might find a note over at the dam that refers to something like over another part of the map, and you're putting those leads together until it kind of creates a bigger picture for you, and then you know when to go.
That's
and I
good.
like that.
Yeah.
It's a small change, but it makes questing that little bit more immersive, where you're looking at your surroundings, you're picking things up, you're really involved, and you're not just going to someone, clicking all the buttons, and then going from point A to point B to point C, and then going back for your rewards or something. So I'm going to be interested to see how that plays out, whether it's confusing or not. But it's a nice little wrinkle. That
I can
kind
feel
of
myself
that.
going, I just want to know where to go.
Yeah, I was thinking
right
that,
now. But I do. The thing is, I don't want to be too harsh on the game. Obviously, I am very excited for it. But as you described it, I was kind of waiting for something new. And this is a new approach to quest design, which is kind of cool. It feels refreshing. I like the dynamic stuff that games like Assassin's Creed have been doing, where it's like, I mean, they give you options. Ubisoft give you options in the menu so that you can have that piecemeal approach if you want. But it's cool. It's a more immersive way to explore an open world.
That's it. It's like I said, it's a lot of familiar stuff. I think so far. It seems like it's that stuff done really well, but if you're a little over open world first person games that have an RPG leaning, like this probably might not introduce anything brand new to shake that genre up. But I think that's fine. Rebellion, obviously they've made some excellent games, but they're not working with the same resources that a Bethesda is, or even an Obsidian is. And it's cool that something like this that feels a little bit more contained, a little bit more focused, is kind of coming out, putting it at the very least their own spin on the conventional mechanics and systems that we expect out with something like this, and at least from a visual and story standpoint, are giving us something a little bit new, and that isn't just a retread of other narratives or other settings that we've been to.
That's definitely my overall thing, is that I champion a dev doing something different, and obviously they've done so many Sniper Elite games for a good part of the last 20 years. Sniper Elite Resistance just came out last month. I love them going, hey, let's shift perspective entirely, do a first-person game, do an RPG, let's do something like that. So I'm psyched that this is happening, regardless.
I will say I got 2 gripes to finish on, left them for the end, because I think some of these will definitely be ironed out before the final build comes out, I hope. One issue I had was with enemy AI here and there. I mentioned that big robot that I was fighting. It felt like I was very easily cheesing that guy, and he wouldn't follow me into certain rooms, which was a bit deflating.
That's old school in a way that I think I would think is funny and kind of heartwarming in a way, but I get it.
That's it. It just, I was like, that's why I died so much, because I thought, I don't want to kill this thing this way. I want to kill it as was intended, right? And that happened a few other times with the normal enemies as well, where they would chase you and be a little bit dumb, or line up for your headshots, or not be as aggressive. But in the package that the team sent over afterwards, they did say some of the AI issues were known issues, so hopefully that's ironed out when the final build launches, but worth pointing out now. One more thing, this is a tough one, because it's not necessarily a problem, it's just a bit of an inconvenience and something that I wasn't expecting. I didn't know this game was also coming out on last-gen consoles.
I know that now.
And even though I was playing this PC build, it meant that a lot of the stuff that I've come to take for granted in a seamless open world felt like a little bit fragmented. Like there are a lot of loading screens when you're going into interiors, for instance. And that was just something that I kind of noticed and wasn't necessarily expecting. Not a deal breaker.
That didn't hit Starfield. Did it?
Not a deal breaker by any means. It's just, keep in mind that there's definitely going to be limitations on it, I think, from a technical perspective, because it is releasing cross-gen still. As the newest Sniper Elite did, didn't it?
I think so. Resistance did, yeah.
So it's not like, if you've played one of those games, I imagine you know what you're in for in terms of the ceiling there. But that was just one other thing, apart from the enemy AI, that I kind of noticed as feeling a little bit antiquated.
Yeah, I think it goes alongside that idea of making an RPG that feels, at least to me, feels like it's from the early 2010s, which you can argue was a great period for first-person RPGs in themselves, and was one of the last times that Bethesda and Obsidian and whatever were on top of their game as well. And so, I'm completely fine with all this stuff. To a degree, unless I end up dying to cheap stuff.
You know what?
We'll see.
I was going to end on the negative note. I'm going to end on a high note. I'm going to end on something that will pop me and you specifically. If you're a listener to the What Culture Gaming podcast,
go subscribe.
No, Scott Tilford and I love a regional accent. And thank God that this is set in the north of England and hasn't scrimped on the regional accents, Scott. I heard Geordie, I heard Scouse, I heard Irish, I heard Yorkshire, and they were all pretty good ones as well. So voice acting is definitely a W for me. And again, it just adds to that feeling of you're picking a relatively unique setting and you're not doing a sort of flattened out version of it.
Can you be a Geordie in the game?
I don't know, I don't think so.
I didn't ask you about story choices and dialogue and whatever, but more Geordie representation ever since Sid in Final Fantasy 16 was a bit of a Geordie guy. No, Gav. Sorry. That's because usually there's a Sid in Final Fantasy, which there is, but it's a different dude. Ever since then, I feel like Geordie representation has been a bit of a thing.
Yeah.
And they're in Kingdom Come, and we're going to be in Atomfall, so more Geordies, man!